This is a really sweet a session, Julie. I'm excited because you know them way better than I do, but some of the greatest men, I think, some of my greatest friends, Pastor Tom and Todd, are going to come up and share. And I'm extremely excited for this session because I think it's going to be very engaging and we're going to learn so much. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I think the greatest thing I could say about them, I could stand up here all day long, but I've known both of them since I was 13 years old, and I can honestly say that who you see on the platform, it's even better behind the scenes. So we love these guys so much. So Dad and Todd,
come on y'all, give some love, Pastor Tom, Pastor Todd.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jefferson. You can grab a seat. This is probably one of my favorite sessions because I get to have this time with my dad up here. And I just, I want to, before we jump in, just want to say again, I understand everything that, Dad, we are celebrating, even over these couple days through conference, is because of the foundation of your and Mom's life and service to Jesus and your love for the church. And we've just been able to build off that foundation. So, love you.
Love you, man.
So
what an exciting time. I tell you, we've been phenomenally blessed in the conference and with all the sessions, and I hope this can add a little value as well.
Yeah, the topic of the next few minutes we have together, we're going to try to get done a little early so that you can get outside and see the sunshine, because some of you from Michigan, you need some sun on you, in Jesus' name. We're going to talk about transitions in leadership, and we're going to talk specifically about our transition in leadership. But when you think about it, all of leadership is really transitional. Leadership is all about a leader seeing the change that needs to come and leading that change, preparing themselves, leading the people around them, understanding what needs to happen, and then getting their people there. So really, all of leadership is transitioning. It's about you modeling for somebody how to do it, then mentoring somebody how to do it, then empowering them to do it. It's constantly about you giving away your job or your responsibility to somebody else that you've equipped so that you can then take on the next mountain that God's got for you to take on. So you see that what we're going to talk about today doesn't just pertain, like if you're thinking, oh man, I wish I'd gone to the beach because I'm not trying to transition my ministry. Well, you better be trying to transition your ministry. You better be constantly going, who do I need to be raising up so I can take on the next thing that God has for me to take on? And when you think about it, any church, any ministry, any business starts off small, and then you get, maybe some volunteers added on, and maybe a staff or two added on, and you've got to keep adding and growing and passing on what you've got so that others can grow, and then you can step into your next thing.
Todd, I have a good friend who's a corporate leader, a CEO, and a major president of a major company in America. And this guy sits on the AT&T's board, Coca-Cola's board, all these big boards. But he said something one day, it was really profound. He said, every day I would consider in my organization, who can I give this assignment to that I did today away to someone tomorrow? Because everything that I do, if I can give it away, then that opens me up to embrace all the new opportunities that are coming for myself and for our company. And I thought, man, that's the way leaders think. Yeah. They're thinking, who can we transition? Who can we raise up? Who can we help do that? I felt that as a coach. When I made the transition from being a college football player, I was a running back. I know I look like a guard now, but I was actually a running back. And but when I made that transition to the sidelines, it was no longer about me being on the field. My fulfillment was helping players perform at their highest level, get them prepared, equipped, and ready, and coached up so they could perform at their highest level. And I found a whole new fulfillment in seeing my players perform. Not just me perform, but my players perform on the field. And that's what I think we should take on, that perspective of a coach's mindset of always raising up those that we can get on the field and then celebrating them in their performance on the field for the kingdom.
Chris brought that out last night when he talked about you. He said, coaches don't win the game, the players win the game.
Right.
And so the coaches are constantly trying to help other people win the game.
Right.
And so as leaders, that applies to us. And I think about great leaders. Great leaders are never trying to hold on to power.
Right.
They are constantly looking for ways to give it away. So a great leader is not trying to hold on. A great leader is constantly looking for who and how can I give this away so that I can go on and do what I am called to do. Because if you never pass along what you're doing, then your church or your ministry is going to be stuck with you. It's never going to grow beyond you. You're never going to be able to go and move on and take on the next thing. And you're called to take on the next thing. So you've got to raise people up.
The greatest way to lift the lid of your ministry, people all the time say, well, how do we grow our ministry? And Pastor Chris gave us those great, phenomenal principles this morning. I've heard him teach on that many times, but every time I hear it, I get something fresh from it. And it was so fresh this morning, just tremendous. But I think that's the key. When you learn to empower the leaders around you, raise them up, it lifts the lid of your ministry. It's the quickest way I know to grow and expand your ministry and create ownership. Because, we all want people on our teams to really feel the passion that we have for the ministry, right? Well, the only way you create that kind of passion in them is to create ownership in them. And the only way you create ownership is when you empower them, okay? And then you learn how to be encouraging of them as you're then expanding for the next things God has for you to grow the ministry. Because if you want to grow your ministry, keep yourself growing. And one of the greatest ways to keep yourself growing is keep your team growing around you. So as you're helping grow your team, help them grow them. I just happen to be at a stage in life when I'm going back for my second doctorate degree. And I was asked before the council reviewing me as my application for my PhD in organizational leadership, they're like looking at me like, okay, you've been a successful leader, you're 72 years old, and so like, why are you doing this? And I said, it's real simple. I want to keep stretching myself because how can I be an example to younger leaders if I'm not continuing growing and stretching myself, putting myself in a dynamic where I'm growing and learning? Plus, I want to help others continue to grow and learn. So I want to continue to grow and learn. So I think it's just a basic principle, Todd.
And that's so good. Doesn't it encourage you? It makes you go, okay, what can I do? I need to change today. One of the things that you've got to remember for you to reach your potential, change isn't optional, it's inevitable.
Right.
So for your ministry to reach its potential, for your church to reach its potential, change isn't optional, it's inevitable. And as leaders, our job is to know what needs to change and to keep that change in ourselves and in our team moving forward.
And I think, Todd, that we've worked very hard together to create a culture that embraces change. So change is not an interruption. Change is like when Peyton Manning would go to the line of scrimmage and he'd holler, Omaha, Omaha. In other words, alert, this is a live sound. We're going to call a better play now than we called in the huddle because of the defense we're facing. We have a better chance to execute and be victorious in this play. So when they hear the word Omaha, change is coming. They don't resist it. They go, oh, this is good. It's going to give us a better advantage to accomplish what we're called to do. So when you create that culture in your environment and celebrate that culture and celebrate those who have embraced that and change, it's amazing how it makes change becomes the norm. Matter of fact, like why have we been doing the same thing so long here? How can we get better? Because like Todd, I think you said, we're never going to satisfy with Dr. Maxwell's interview for the best. We're always looking for the better.
Right. So when we began to discuss our transition, we started talking about it many years before the time actually came when it was needed because we didn't want it to sneak up on us. And we didn't want to just wait to cross that bridge when we get to it. If you have that attitude, you'll probably never get to the bridge or the bridge will be burned by the time you get to it. So Talk about it. Get it out there. Get it on the table. Have open conversations. And Dad, you led that so well in our process together. But you, being a coach, had to have kind of sports analogy tied around our transition. And
the key to every victory, I mean, if you talk to any coach, ask him what the key to the victory, it's all about your preparation. You got to prepare. The Bear Bryant, the legendary coach of Alabama, he set the tone for college coaching. He would prepare 1 hour for every minute of the game. So he spent a minimum of 60 hours a week in preparation for every football game. It became the standard for us. So you're always thinking ahead. You're always preparing. You're analyzing, what do I do here? Boom, boom, various scenarios. And I think being a coach, that kind of helped us to realize that we've got to really prepare for this. You don't let it just happen. You got to be prepared for transition. And I think the second thing is I ran track too. I love track. And I love to run the relay races. And I realized that everything in a relay race is contingent upon how effective you are in exchanging the baton in the exchange zone. Right. Do we have film of the Olympics? Watch this. Boom, right there. We lost the Olympics in Beijing with that bad exchange. And then we had the 4 fastest men. Look at our women. We got the 4 fastest women. Boom. Messed up the exchange. By the way, there's only one chance to exchange the baton well in the exchange zone. You don't get a second shot in the big races. That's why we practice the exchange, work on it, and understand what that means. That's why transition planning and your leadership through transition is critical. Matter of fact, I think it's so critical that it is really what our leadership will be evaluated by. How well did we transition in leadership? How successful were our successors in whatever area we passed off to? I remember, Todd, when you started passing off to other student pastors, because at one time you were our student pastor and our worship leader and everything else, but you had to learn to pass those batons so you could take on even greater responsibilities and roles in the church, in ministry.
And so in those times, again, wherever you are in your ministry and whatever responsibility you might have, be looking ahead and going, if I'm going to someday not do this for the rest of my life, who am I preparing and how do I prepare them? And so when it comes to preparing, there's 3 things that we pointed out for discussion purposes. One is you got to prepare yourself, then you have to prepare your successor, and you have to prepare your team. So you got to prepare yourself, and that pertains to both the person that is passing the baton and the person that's getting ready to receive the baton. You got to prepare yourself and get ready for this exchange zone. Then you've got to prepare the successor. Obviously, that's Dad preparing me, or me preparing the worship guys that I was passing things off to, or the executive team, and then preparing the team. And so let's break those down, Dad. Why don't you first talk maybe about preparing yourself?
Yeah, I think, well, here's the thing, especially ladies, for we men. Our identity is so tied up in what we do. You know, it's just the way we're wired, you know. It's like, and oftentimes, especially if you're in some form of senior leadership, you can get hung up in your title and in your position. And so that can be a difficult challenge for you to think about, how does my world look like when I'm not in this role or on this part of the team? And I think I had to prepare myself. And one of the things I did with that is I all the time trying to see the big picture of the team, the big C, the big picture of the church, and understanding that I'm not the one that's going to carry it across the line. You know, I was blessed from the very beginning when we started Christ Fellowship over 34 years ago, that I had a precious wife, my wife Donna. We had been serving the local church together. It was a team effort together. And when we stepped into this, it's been a team effort all along the journey. And so it was a process of us preparing ourselves, understanding that for the welfare of the church and the advancement of the kingdom of God and the mission, it was for us to make that pass. So I had to keep focusing on the bigger picture and the welfare of the church. So it wasn't about what was best for us, it was what was best for the church. And it wasn't about what time I felt I needed to make the pass, or Donna and I needed to make the pass. It was more about, when are Todd and Julie ready to receive the baton and run well with it? And is the church prepared for this transition? How are we? And we're going to talk about some of the practical things we did to do that. But I think preparing yourself and understanding there is life beyond the current role you have and serve. And Dr. Maxwell said one time, you should never leave anything. You should always be going to something. So I right away had to prepare myself for the life beyond being, quote, senior pastor of Christ Fellowship Church. What did that life look like for me? What did that look like? The mentoring, the writing, the encouragement, the teaching, getting more involved with our leadership development, all the things that being in the senior role, when I stepped out and passed that baton, I'm going to be freed up to take on new opportunities, new challenges. So my focus was not on what I was letting go of, what I now had the opportunity to take hold of. And that helped prepare us. And I would just say one other thing, that it's important that you have your companion with you on this journey, and that because it impacts all of us. It impacts your family. Transition impacts family. It impacts all of us. So that's an important element, to have your family with you in that transition. And I find a lot of senior guys, Todd, resist transition because another thing is, not only because their identity's tied up in that, and they're not quite sure what that next move is for them, but a lot of them are not financially prepared to pass the baton and move to the next role. And I think that's why it's also important that you need to be preparing yourself for you guys in senior leadership, when you start thinking about that down the road, preparing yourself financially for that as well. And for you that have had long-term stints at churches, if your board's not helping you prepare, please call me so I can come talk to your board for you. I'll be your advocate. I'll come in and I'm going to set you up, baby. I'm going to say, hey, you need to honor this man and woman of God that served you and take care of them, you know. We have such a great board here that they've been right there with us and just advocating for us and supporting us and in our role. But that were a few of the things, Todd, that we had to do.
And I think just going back to what you said about making sure we're bringing the family along, if there's one area we look back on and go, we wish we had done that better, it was Dad and I had a ton of conversations about this. We talked about it all the time. But like most guys, we didn't go home and talk to our family as much as we should. And so we didn't keep them up to speed where our conversation was. We had conversations, obviously. But then we had to realize, let's slow down and let's make sure everybody's on the same, as we were preparing the family in our situation, or in maybe your situation is preparing the families of the people that are involved so everybody's aware.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's so important.
Yeah. When it came to preparing myself in that season of getting ready, I remember I ended up at a meeting with Pastor Brian Houston, and it was a roundtable discussion, and somebody asked him a question about what is the hardest thing in ministry. And that morning when that question was asked, they had just gotten a phone call from down in Sydney about something that had happened in the church, and it was going to make international news and be this big problem that he was going to have to deal with. He didn't even mention that, didn't even think that way. He said the hardest thing in ministry wasn't when we had to build the church and there was only a handful of us in the little room. It wasn't when we were trying to figure out how to do this or that. That wasn't the hardest. The hardest thing in ministry, he said, was what he was doing right then, handing off what he had created. He had built this church, and now he's been in the process of giving away responsibility, empowering leaders, kind of taking on a new role. And he said that is the hardest thing. And so I held that in my heart because it was still a couple years before our transition was going to take place. And I realized he and Mom were the ones that built Christ Fellowship. I mean, we've been right along with him for 30 years building and working, but I didn't quit my job to start the church. He did that. And so I understood all along it wasn't mine to take, it was his to give. So my job was to prepare myself so that when he was ready to give it, I was ready to receive it. I had guys on my team when I was in my mid-30s saying, Todd, you're ready, man. Just go tell your dad you're ready. Tell him you're ready to take the reins. Tell him I'm like, that is a wrong spirit. I want him to go, he's ready. And so I'm going to ready myself. I'm going to grow myself. I'm going to get tools in my toolbox. I'm going to have guys like Dad and John Maxwell speak into me and tell me what's missing in my toolbox. I'm going to ask questions of, what do you think I still need to prepare myself to be ready for it? So in that period of time, I was readying myself, but I wasn't trying to take hold of something. My hand was like this, so that and there were a couple of times I thought it was going in my hand. I'm like, oh, guess not. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
You know, hello. So, you know, one of the great things that I realized in preparing Todd, because Todd had all this ability, had all this wisdom, had the DNA, of course, and everything had been with us every step of the way. But I realized that I needed to do a couple things to help him get ready. One of them was I need to pull him more into my world, because Todd was at the time my executive pastor and running all the day-to-day operations. And I'm out here looking more at the global picture, the bigger picture. And I said, Todd, you got to get out here. I want you to get into my circle. I want you to meet key influencers of ministry that we've been blessed to meet around the world. I want you to know these people. I used to be the only one that basically worked with all of our major donors of the church and people that were there to help support vision and could make, we call them kingdom builders. And Todd was not in that circle. So I said, Todd, you've got to be intentional, and I've got to be intentional to bring you with me for that lunch, for that dinner, to get to know them. We got very intentional about getting him more pulpit time because he needed to ramp up and start preaching. So we actually rotated series there for the last month or so. We made a formal declaration to the church in our final year of transition that we were going to be co-pastors. And I said, we're going to actually co-pastor.
So we were co-pastors for 18 months.
Yeah.
Just to get the church up to speed with what was happening. But internally, during those 18 months, Dad did not function like the senior, or like he took his hands off more and more things.
Right.
And I would even say a couple of years before that, you were even giving me more and more room to make decisions and fail and coach me up.
Right, but I mean, from speaking to leading staffs, because I used to always lead staff, then I got you started leading, then pretty soon you did that, and I started fading back, even to our meeting with our board of elders. I always led the board of elders, and I said, Todd, I want you to start leading the elder meetings. I mean, I was getting him into every role that he was going to have to face and work him into that. So just think about that. In your area of ministry, your area of responsibility, how do you integrate those you're training and grooming up? How do you integrate them into your world and expand their world so they have these opportunities? I heard Pastor Chris say something at the luncheon we had just a little bit ago. He was talking about what they're doing for their interns in their college ministry. He's sending them out to do their practicum, so they're studying at all their various campuses, whether they're in portable church in a high school, or whether they've got a campus of 2,000, or wherever they are. They're looking at every various scenario, so they're equipped at whatever level they step into ministry. They kind of had an experience. If we're going to set up and tear down every day in a schoolhouse, I've got that experience. If we're going to go into a permanent facility and we got 2,000 in worship, got that experience. And I thought, man, that's really wise to start them off that young. So that was my mentality for Todd. I wanted Todd to be exposed to a lot of things he was not exposed to, so he could step into that with confidence because of that experience.
One of the things that I wrote down here is great leaders leave room for leaders to lead. So great leaders are going to leave room for other leaders to lead. They're not going to use up all the leadership oxygen, make all the decisions, they're going to just go, I'm going to leave some room here. And Dad, you did that. You always left room, and you would jump in if I was going to run off a cliff with something. You were like, hey, well, let's stop. But for the most time, you let me go. And one of the things in this season of preparation, and you'll have this in whatever area of ministry that you're preparing somebody to step in and own it, have great communication back and forth. Don't let things build up like, I can't believe, because there were times where you would jump back in on something that you had clearly given me I could go do and lead, and I would hear you had a meeting and did something, and I'm like, so I had an option, I had a choice. I had to go, am I going to be like, can't believe it, did it again, can't believe he's stopping me, or do I go to Dad and go, can't believe it. No, so I go to Dad.
You did some of those. Yeah, I remember you doing some of those.
I would basically go, Dad, I thought you gave this to me.
Right.
Did I misunderstand you, or is there something I'm doing wrong? Because I want to learn. So we kept the communication so clear in the process.
That's been one of the greatest things, one of the greatest assets that we've had, is that we've had such open, transparent, authentic conversation with each other. And I tell you what, I tried to bring Todd to the table on everything. I didn't try to make decisions in vacuums. I even wanted to think out loud and lead out loud. Think about that for a minute. Because a lot of times we go through processes to make decisions and we do it quietly. I think you need to do it out loud. That way we get to learn how to think, how to process. And then as we were grooming for transition, I was not the first one to speak. I would back up and say, so son, what do you think? How do you evaluate this? What do you think? I wanted Todd to come out. When it came, we were growing and multiplying, such growth, moved over here, and we went from 4,000 to 8,000, literally almost felt like overnight. Then we grew to like 12,000, and boom, we were just busting. And I wanted to build a larger sanctuary. I mean, that's old school. You get a bigger room, And then finally, the city fought us so much, Todd came and said, Dad, let's go multi-site. And I said, well, help me understand multi-sites. He says, well, I'll study and come back. He studied multi-site and came back. There were not many people doing multi-site. Life Church was doing multi-site. And so Todd came back with the idea, and boom, we launched multi-site, and it became, boom, the first campus we have. Royal Palm Beach runs about 6,000, 7,000 now at that one regional location. And then multi-site became the answer. And I told everybody, multi-site, God birthed it through Todd. And I tried to quickly point out to the staff, to the congregation at large, and to our leadership, I wanted to point out all the things that Todd was leading well in, because I wanted to help affirm his leadership to our team. And that's an important principle when you're transitioning. be quick to affirm those you're transitioning. Look for every opportunity you can to celebrate them, to point out their success, and do it in public. Do it in public. That just helps them so much.
And one of the things you did great too, because there were a few things we were turning the church and changing in that 18-month of transition. And again, apply this to your ministry. Some things you want to change, a little bit of a different vision or approach that Dad maybe wouldn't have naturally chosen to do. But he celebrated it like it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. So something happened on the weekend. He's like, this is awesome. We need to let the students take over and do confetti every weekend, and this is just great. I mean, he didn't like it, but he acted like he liked it, right? And so then all the other grandparents in the room would go, this is great. Our kids love to come to church, and it's awesome. But he cheered that on. I didn't have to cheer it on.
You know one of the greatest breakthroughs I had? I did not call the soundboard every week about the volume levels. I mean, guys, you got to admit, that's been a breakthrough. It's like it was an answer to prayer back there. And I realized that's not my call anymore. That's yours, Todd. So when I start getting letters from the old saints, where's the hymns? The volume levels are so loud. I said, talk to Todd. Yeah, talk to Todd. I love that. Now, that was a great thing when I got to pass that one off. Hallelujah.
Okay, so we talked about anything else on preparing yourself or preparing your replacement? Anything else on those
one of the other great things that I was blessed with, too, having John Maxwell here, I got to bounce a lot of things off John. I sought out the wisdom of other people. And I think it's always great in transition to do that. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, Passing the Leadership Baton, because there wasn't that much out there about it. And people aren't talking about it. And a lot of my peers, do you realize in America, Leadership Network told me this last year, there's over 60,000 churches in America that are in the transitional phase right now. Men of my generation have reached that point where they need to pass the baton. The sad reality is so many of my peers have not prepared a transitional plan. They don't have a strategy or a plan for transition. And listen, that's not good leadership. We who have been given the responsibility of leading the church, we should always be thinking ahead. And what do we need to help keep advancing the work of God and position it? And what I love is that Don and I, in our years of leadership as senior leaders, we were preparing a foundation for what God was going to do under the leadership of Todd and Julie. And so our ceiling became their floor. And from there, boom. And I mean, the church has exploded. It just, boom, just took off. And there's nobody more excited than Don and I are about what God's doing. My goodness gracious, we sowed our life into this. Now we're seeing all this great fruit. And the great thing of it is, I don't have to carry the burden of the day-to-day ministry. Hallelujah. Crank the sound up, baby. Let's go.
Hilarious. That's great. You know, one of the things that I wasn't planning on saying this, but one of the things that I didn't realize until the moment I became the senior pastor was the spiritual weight of this thing. I've been with you, Julie, I've served with you and Mom since the church was only a couple years old, and I felt like I was right there with you the whole time, and even during the co-pastor time, right? He's still my dad, so he had 51% of the shares. I mean, any way I cut it, he's still the boss, right? But the moment the baton passed, I felt this spiritual heaviness, and for a couple days I couldn't sleep. I didn't know what it was. I felt the spiritual battle, this weight of, and so I went to my dad and I said, how many times have I apologized? I am so sorry. I would go to him. I've been to him many times to go, I had no idea the weight of what you carried until you actually get in that place where you're carrying it. I thought I knew, but I had no idea. And all the times I asked you to make sure you talk about groups in your message and you push Dream Team and you push this and make sure you say this 3 times. And I put all that on him was crazy. And I didn't realize it till I got in this seat. And it just brought to the point, remember, that we don't know what the other people are carrying. On our team, we don't know what they're carrying. We don't know what the responsibilities they have. Just being sensitive and aware of those things. So the last area is preparing your team. And under this point, the main thing we're talking about here is communication is king. When you think you've talked about it, talk about it some more. Right. When you think you've communicated it, communicate some more. Make sure that it's very clear. By the time we actually transitioned the church, people thought it had already happened a year ago. So on the big Sunday where they all laid hands on us and Julie and prayed and everybody cried and woo, glory. I had friends that said, didn't that happen last month? Didn't we already do that? Didn't you already? I thought you already were the pastor. Perfect. That's what you want. You want so much communication in the water that it's normal that this has happened. So we had communication really clear between us all along the way, communication within our family, clear communication with our team. Don't make your team guess what's going on. Don't speak in parables. They might be like the disciples and not get it. So be very clear. This is what we're doing. Now, it may change, but this is the timeline. This is what we're thinking, or we're not sure about this part of the timeline, but keep that all on the table so your team isn't going, I don't know. I'm not sure. I thought it would have happened by now. I can't believe it.
I think it's as important to communicate what's not changing as what is changing. In our particular dynamic here, it was that my wife and I, Donna, we're not going anywhere. We're going to stay here. Our title's gone from senior pastors to founding pastors. And we tried to clarify what our roles were going to be. And now, here, Todd and Julie are becoming lead pastors at the time. Now they've taken on the title as they've gotten
finally
older.
got old enough to say
They've gotten
senior.
older and mature. Now they're senior pastors. But, you know, that was important that they knew what. But we started our communication, and this is important. We started with our board of elders so that we run blood. We'd already had a contingency plan in place. We had a crisis transition plan in place. By the way, does your church have that? Do you have a crisis transition plan? I had a pastor friend of mine and his wife coming back from a missionary trip in Africa, got picked up in Texas by their executive pastor, number 2 guy, and all 3 of them were killed tragically in a car accident on the way from the airport. No plan. Church didn't know what to do. Nobody was ready to step up. They didn't know who should step up. They're all looking at each other. Who's going to step up? Who's going to preach this week? What do we do in a time of crisis? That's why we, as leaders, we have to have transition plans. We didn't have to have a crisis. We already had a crisis plan in place. If something ever happened to Donna and myself, there was already a plan in place of what our board would do and boom, 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 and how the next steps would be. And I think that's important that we're always thinking. Do you know that we've had discussion about the transition plan down the road?
I started thinking about transition the moment we took leadership.
I already started
thinking,
we're already praying and thinking
I need to
about
work myself
that
out of this job
down the road.
Yeah.
But we started communicating. Then another place like
Hurry.
Another place I went was to key influencers in the church. I went to key influencers, key people who had sacrificed to bring us where we are. I went to our founding families who are still with us. And we had one-on-one meetings with them to explain the transition plan and the process and answer any questions. And then we went to our exec team, then we went to the staff, then we went to our dream teamers at large, then we went to the church family at large. Communication is critical. Critical.
Yeah, one of the things we said when that you weren't retiring, you were repositioning.
Right.
So they saw mom and dad.
Everybody said, oh, you're retiring. I'm not retiring. You don't retire from a calling. You retire from a career, but you don't retire from a calling. You reposition yourself from the calling, right? There's no retirement in the kingdom. You better believe, baby, we're getting after it right up until that last moment. You step into eternity, baby. I'm gonna fall flat on the face, man. He gave it all he had. It's like, boom, right there. That's the way
and the way we reinforced that message is I had just preached a series out of Nehemiah on a vision of where the church was going, and the transition kind of series happened. And then the next series, I had Dad preach, and Julie and I sat on the front row. And the whole church was like, oh, okay, it's all good. So it just sent a clear message that everything that we've been saying and talking about, this is what we meant.
And when Todd and Julie made the transition, my wife and I are on the front row. And we're their biggest cheerleaders. We're cheering them on. Staff meeting, when I'm in town, I'm at staff meeting on the front row, cheering them on. Because this is God's plan. This is what God's doing. This is God's church. And this is God's kingdom. So we're involved in that. And by the way, I want to tell some of you guys that are in senior leadership, I had no idea that 7-8 years ago, when my wife and I passed the baton, that I would be as fulfilled and rewarded and energized, and opportunities I have to say no to because I have more opportunities than ever before to minister, to sow into lives, to be a father to so many men and women that need a spiritual father, to write, to mentor, to raise up the next generation of leaders. Now I'm so energized. My wife was doing studies on completing her master's degree, and I got so fired up, I've got back into my PhD degree. What do I need a second doctorate for? That's crazy. But I'm energized. I'm fired up. And I'm more excited than ever. So I want to tell you something. There is great life beyond what you think is your role right now, okay? There's great life beyond that. I couldn't resist that, Todd.
That's awesome. That's good. Okay.
Hey, can I say one other thing real quick? I just thought of this. I don't have any notes. I should have brought notes. He's organized. I'm not organized. That's always been the way it is. Joe organized. We call it, hey, if you want to get through Disney World and Epcot and Animal Kingdom in one day,
I'm your guy.
Ride every ride and see every attraction. It was a mission. When he was a young boy, he had it all mapped out. He led us on a charge with a time clock. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. He organized it. I mean, it was unbelievable. You're Joe Organizer, I'm Mr. Spontaneous. So here we go. We've been a good combo. That's all I got to say. Here's my thought. Hey, I've had a lot of concussions. You know what I mean? So I mean, there was no concussion protocol when I played. You know what I mean? They had little ammonia capsules. They'd break in your nostril and yourself, and they'd put you right back in the game. You know. That's why I twitch sometimes. You know. So. I did think of something as you were talking about preparing the team, preparing everything for the succession to be well. Couple things I want to just mention real quick. Number one, you always want to pass when things are strong. The organization, you want to pass when the organization is strong. You want to seize momentum, and that's when you want to make the pass. That's like surfing. You want, when the wave is built just right for you to start paddling, jump on that board and ride that momentum. Don't let it go down and start to pass. Most guys pass it when it's on the way down. My goodness, it's horrible for a leader then to take that and try to build it back up. Pass when it's going this direction. And we passed when it was going this direction, then it went boom, that direction. Hasn't slowed down since that. Second thing, clean up any messes. Don't pass messes on to anybody else. If there's a mess you've got to deal with, or a problem you've not dealt with, or a staff member you've not dealt with, or any other, clean those things up. Take care of it. Make the hard calls. I had a pastor friend who he got the baton passed to him, and the pastor passed it to him, left all the messes. And he had to try to, his whole first 2 years was cleaning up messes that were left behind that should have been cleaned up before the other pastor passed the baton. So that poor pastor was just battling messes his first 2 years. Man, I clean the messes up, pass it when things are going great. And by the way, guys, step out of the game like Barry Sanders did. He was at his prime time, only needed one more year to break every NFL rushing record there was, and Barry Sanders dropped the microphone, walked off the field. Wow. Go out when you're strong. Go out on top. Go out when the organization's strong, and prepare them for that. Okay, I had to throw it in.
That's good. My closing thoughts are this one. Give yourself a break. When you step into a new role, whatever that new role might be, you might have been a 7, 8, 9, 10 in the role you were in before, and you step into a new role, and if you're a driven type person, you put all this pressure on yourself to be a 8, 9, 10 again. You can't be an 8, 9, 10. You've never done that role before. Give yourself permission to go back and be a 1. Start over and learn and grow. I put too much pressure on myself at the beginning that I had to do everything right and be this, and I had to just be me and grow and learn. Second thing, you've got nothing to prove, but lots to share. God's put you there. So Julie and I tell ourselves all the time, we didn't ask for this. We didn't like, oh, pick me, pick me. No, God picked us, so we're here, and so we're going to walk in the grace of what God's put us in and not trying to prove ourselves, just walk in that. And the last thing I would say is take it slow, take the corner slow, right? Just because you're pregnant with ideas doesn't mean you got to push right away. When you step into a new plan, new thing. I wanted to change a bunch of things, and Dad had a lot of wisdom and said, Todd, you know, the transition is changed enough for right now. Why don't we let this settle in and just let this go for a minute, and then you can bring these changes.
Here's something you do great. You absolutely do great. We started making the shift, but every shift we've made, Todd has always reached back and validated the sacrifices of the past for where we are today and where we need to go tomorrow. We're still celebrating people who sacrificed to get us in our very first facility, okay? We still celebrate them. And Todd and Julie both are so great at celebrating Don and I and our leadership. And validating the people who have come to this place on the journey. So listen, always celebrate, always recognize, and link to everything you knew you're doing to the foundations of the past. I think that's absolutely critical and will help you in your transition.
So regardless of where you are as a leader, you should always be transitioning. Hopefully these tools that we've walked through will help you have success at that.